My husband has finally taken a stand against his controlling family, and I feel both relieved and heartbroken about how everything unfolded. I'm Evelyn Mitchell, a 32-year-old social worker at a local nursing home. And this is the story of how my mother-in-law's latest attempt to manipulate our lives became the breaking point in our family dynamics. Growing up, my husband Nathan was the golden child, and his mother Diana had always been exceptionally close to him. While his father Gregory spent long hours at work as a high school principal, Diana, a former high school teacher herself, devoted all her attention to Nathan. This created a noticeable imbalance in how she treated her children, Nathan and his sister Vanessa. Nathan was always Mom's favorite, Vanessa would often say, her voice tinged with a mix of resentment and resignation. Despite Diana's obvious favoritism, Nathan tried his best to be a supportive older brother to Vanessa, always being there when she needed him. However, both Vanessa and Diana's behavior sometimes crossed boundaries in ways that made me incredibly uncomfortable. One particularly memorable incident occurred when Nathan and I first started dating. At the time, Nathan, fresh out of graduate school with his computer science degree, was living with his family in their suburban home. His parents had given him the entire basement level, complete with his own entrance, so he could maintain some privacy and have guests over. This arrangement seemed perfect until I realized that boundaries meant nothing to Vanessa. The privacy incident. One morning, while Nathan and I were still asleep in his basement bedroom, Vanessa burst in without knocking. The intrusion was jarring. I was wearing only a silk nightgown, and the sudden invasion of privacy made me freeze under the covers. Instead of apologizing or showing any sign of embarrassment, Vanessa casually perched on the edge of Nathan's desk and started chattering about some reality TV show as if her presence was completely normal. "Did you see last night's episode?" she asked excitedly, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort and Nathan's growing irritation. The drama was insane. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. This wasn't just about modesty. It was about basic respect for personal space. After discussing it with Nathan, we agreed to install a lock on the door. It seemed like a reasonable solution to a simple problem. How naive we were. The very next morning, Vanessa's reaction to finding the door locked was nothing short of explosive. She didn't just knock, she pounded on the door, rattling it in its frame. "Nathan! Why is this door locked?" Her voice echoed through the basement. "Open up right now." When Nathan finally opened the door, Vanessa stormed in, her face flushed with anger. Her eyes landed on me, still in bed, and her expression twisted with contempt. "So this is why the door's locked," she spat, gesturing at me dismissively. "Because of this skank?" The word hung in the air like a slap. I felt my throat tighten as Nathan stepped between us. "We're siblings," Vanessa continued, her voice rising. "We don't keep secrets from each other. We never have." Nathan's response was measured but firm. "This isn't about secrets, Vanessa. This is about privacy and basic respect. You can't just barge in while we're sleeping." But Vanessa wasn't listening. She whirled to face me, her finger pointing accusingly. "This is all your fault. You're trying to come between me and my brother." The hostility in her voice was overwhelming. I mumbled an excuse about needing the bathroom and fled the room, my hands shaking as I closed the door behind me. Through the walls, I could hear their continued argument, Vanessa's shrill accusations, and Nathan's attempts to reason with her. The aftermath. When Nathan came to find me later, his face was drawn with concern. "I'm so sorry about that," he said, running his hands through his dark hair in frustration. "I'll talk to her again." This isn't okay. The following weekend, Vanessa offered what could barely pass as an apology. "I just needed to talk to Nathan urgently," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I thought it would be fine. Nathan fixed her with a stern look. It's not fine, and it won't happen again. Right? She nodded sheepishly, but something in her expression told me this wasn't over. I was right. Pattern of hostility. Over the next few months, Vanessa's hostility manifested in more subtle ways. Whenever we disagreed on anything, even something as trivial as movie preferences, and she was around, she'd seize the opportunity to undermine our relationship. "You know, Nathan," she'd say with a calculated smile, "you should really be with someone who shares your interests. Remember Amanda from college? She loved all the same movies you do." Nathan would give her warning looks, but she'd just smirk, clearly pleased with herself. But the worst moments came when she'd corner me alone. The questions would start innocently enough, but they quickly turned invasive. "Why did your last boyfriend break up with you?" she'd ask, her voice dripping with false concern. "Was there something wrong with you?" I mean, Nathan's ex was so much prettier. At first, I tried to maintain peace by staying quiet, but her constant needling wore down my patience. Finally, during one of her interrogation sessions, I snapped. "You know what?" I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "I actually preferred my ex's family. At least they weren't nosy and overbearing." The look of shock on her face was almost worth all the harassment I'd endured. For once, Vanessa was speechless, though I knew this small victory would likely come with consequences. The mother-in-law's interference. Diana's behavior was equally problematic, though in different ways. When I first entered Nathan's life, she simply pretended I didn't exist. However, once she realized our relationship was serious, her tactics changed dramatically. Instead of ignoring me, she began treating me as if I was some kind of threat to her relationship with her son. During family gatherings, she would deliberately exclude me from conversations, acting as if I was invisible. Nathan noticed this behavior occasionally and tried to address it with her, but Diana would deflect or deny any wrongdoing. Her passive-aggressive comments became increasingly pointed. "It must have been nice," she said during one dinner, her voice dripping with disdain, "going to private school while some of us dedicated our lives to public education." She glanced around the table, playing to her audience. "But I suppose that's why you think you're better than everyone else." I gripped my fork tighter, maintaining my composure. As a social worker who spent my days helping others, being labeled as elitist was particularly painful. But Diana wasn't finished. I later learned from Nathan that she had actively tried to discourage him from proposing to me. The proposal aftermath. When Nathan proposed despite his mother's objections, both Diana and Vanessa went into overdrive. They reached out to me separately, their messages filled with thinly veiled threats and manipulative pleas. "You really should consider returning the ring," Diana said during an unexpected phone call. "Nathan isn't thinking clearly, and since he won't listen to reason, I'm hoping you will." Vanessa was even more direct. "You're nothing but a gold digger," she hissed during a confrontation at their house. "My brother deserves someone with actual status. I swear, I'll expose you before the wedding." I immediately shared these conversations with Nathan, who was horrified by their behavior. When he confronted them, they maintained that they were just looking out for his best interests. Diana insisted that I wasn't good enough for her son, while Vanessa doubled down on her accusations. "They're just worried about you," I remember Nathan saying to me later, his voice tired. "But that doesn't excuse their behavior. I love you, regardless of what they think." Wedding preparations. The topic of wedding expenses became another battleground. Nathan and I had saved diligently for our wedding, wanting to maintain our independence. When Diana offered to pay for half the costs, we politely declined. "We've worked hard to save for this," Nathan explained to her, his pride evident in his voice. "We want to do this ourselves." Instead of respecting our decision, Diana turned it into another weapon against me. "I just don't understand," she complained to anyone who would listen. My son never rejected my help before she came along. Now he doesn't need me anymore? To try to keep the peace, we offered Diana the opportunity to organize the rehearsal dinner. She accepted, and for a moment, we thought we'd found a compromise. We were wrong. The rehearsal dinner disaster. The rehearsal dinner was a stark illustration of Diana's passive-aggressive nature. Despite her insistence on planning everything herself, she put minimal effort into the arrangements. The restaurant's private room was decorated with cheap plastic tablecloths, and she'd ordered basic Mexican takeout, a far cry from the elegant dinner she'd initially promised. Throughout the evening, Diana drank excessively, her behavior becoming increasingly erratic. "I can't wait for this whole thing to be over," she announced loudly to the uncomfortable guests. "You have no idea how stressful this has been for me." She paused to take another drink. "And I wasn't even allowed to contribute." Gregory finally intervened, his face tight with embarrassment as he led his wife away from the gathering. Vanessa tried to smooth things over, but Gregory shut her down. That night, in our hotel room, I had my first real argument with Nathan. "They can't come to the wedding," I said, pacing the room. "After tonight, can you imagine what they might do tomorrow?" "My dad will keep them in line," Nathan argued, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "No wedding," I stated firmly, "or they don't come. Those are the options." The wedding morning. Early the next morning, Nathan made the difficult call to his father. His voice was strained but resolute as he delivered the news. "Dad, I'm sorry, but Mom and Vanessa can't come to the wedding," he said, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. "After last night, we just can't risk it." Gregory's response surprised us both. He didn't sound shocked at all. "I understand, son," he said. "I'll make sure they don't show up unexpectedly." Shortly after that conversation, Nathan's phone exploded with messages and calls from both his mother and sister. Diana's voice messages were a mixture of tears and accusations. "How could you do this to your own mother?" she wailed in one message. "After everything I've done for you." Vanessa's messages were more aggressive. "You're letting that woman destroy our family," she texted. "She's poisoned you against us." The wedding revelation. Later, what we learned from Nathan's cousins justified our decision entirely. In the family's women-only WhatsApp group, Vanessa had been orchestrating a plan to wear white dresses to the wedding. "Why should the bride be the only one in white?" she had written, encouraging others to join her protest. Reading those messages, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We had made the right decision. The wedding proceeded beautifully, without any drama or attempts to overshadow our special day. The aftermath. After the wedding, Diana and Vanessa completely stopped speaking to me, which was fine by me. They would invite Nathan to family dinners and events, pointedly excluding me. Nathan would sometimes go, trying to maintain some relationship with his family, while I spent that time with my own parents. Gregory, however, remained kind and supportive. He seemed to understand the toxicity of the situation and made efforts to maintain a separate relationship with us, often meeting us for lunch when Diana was busy with her book club. The new house. Through careful saving and planning, Nathan and I finally achieved our dream of homeownership this year. Our excitement was palpable as we moved into our 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb. We did host a small housewarming party, which Diana, Gregory, and Vanessa attended. I chose to spend that day with my parents, avoiding potential drama. The unexpected call. Then came the phone call that would change everything. 1 month after we'd settled into our new home, my phone lit up with Diana's number, the first direct contact she'd made since our wedding. "Evelyn," she said, her voice unnaturally pleasant. "How are you? How's the new house?" I was immediately on guard. "We're fine, thank you," I replied cautiously. "It must feel quite empty," she continued, her voice taking on an edge. Such a big house for just the two of you. Her words hit like a physical blow. She knew about our struggles with infertility, the failed treatments, the heartbreak, the eventual acceptance. Nathan had stood by me through it all, assuring me that he chose me, not the possibility of children. When I'd offered him an out, he'd held me close and promised that we were enough. Vanessa's pregnant again, Diana announced abruptly. Her sixth child. I knew about Vanessa's situation. Her husband Kevin was unemployed, spending his days gaming while she worked multiple part-time jobs to support their growing family. He refused to use contraception, leading to these continuous pregnancies. Then came Diana's real purpose for calling. Since Vanessa can't work during this pregnancy, we thought you and Nathan should give them your house. After all, it's too big for a childless couple. I nearly dropped the phone in shock. Excuse me? Nathan's already agreed, Diana continued smoothly. He understands that his sister needs the space more than you do. The confrontation. I took a deep breath, my social worker training kicking in as I maintained my composure. Diana, this is our house's. We're still paying the mortgage on it. The suggestion that someone else should move in without our consent is completely inappropriate. Nathan already agreed, she insisted, her voice growing sharp. That's impossible, I replied firmly. Nathan and I make all major decisions together, especially about our home. He would never agree to something like this without discussing it with me first. As a good daughter-in-law, Diana's voice took on a patronizing tone. You should make room for family. If you do this, we can forget all past grievances. My patience snapped. Let me make you a counteroffer, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Since you're so concerned about Vanessa's living situation, why don't you take responsibility? You can get a second job to help pay our mortgage while they live here. I'd be happy to review the payment schedule with you. Diana exploded. That's ridiculous. How dare you suggest I should pay your mortgage? Exactly as ridiculous as expecting us to house Vanessa's entire family, I shot back. The only difference is, I'm asking you to actually contribute something. The sisters call. Minutes after hanging up with Diana, my phone rang again. This time, it was Vanessa. How dare you speak to Mom that way? She shrieked. I always knew you were a gold digger. I felt a calm clarity as I responded. The real gold digger here is the person trying to take over someone else's house without contributing anything. Maybe take a look at your own situation, or better yet, at your husband who refuses to work while you struggle with multiple jobs. That silenced her momentarily. When she spoke again, her voice was trembling with rage. You're cruel, putting money before family. No, Vanessa, I replied steadily. I'm being realistic. You're welcome to stay with us temporarily if you need help, but taking over our home is not an option unless you're prepared to contribute to the mortgage. Later that evening, after these confrontations, I sat in our living room, my hands still shaking slightly as I sipped my tea. The house Nathan and I had worked so hard for, the symbol of our shared dreams and future. They had tried to simply take it away. The audacity of it was still stunning. Update 1. When I shared this situation with Nathan after his business trip, his reaction confirmed what I had suspected. He had never agreed to any such arrangement with his mother. In fact, he had only been told about Vanessa's pregnancy, nothing more. I can't believe she would lie about me like that, Nathan said, his face pale with anger. This has to stop, Evelyn. I'll talk to her. The confrontation call. Nathan's call to his mother was intense. Mom, why did you tell Evelyn I had agreed to give our house to Vanessa? He demanded. Diana tried to backtrack. I didn't lie, sweetheart. I just knew you would want to help your sister, so I took the initiative to speak with Evelyn. That's not your decision to make. Nathan's voice was firm. This is our home, Mom. Evelyn and I worked hard for it. We're not giving it up. But Sarah needs help, Diana's voice rose. She's pregnant, and you have all this space. Then why don't you help her? Nathan interrupted. Why don't you and Dad take them in? Your father won't allow it, Diana admitted. But you have such a big house, and since Evelyn can't have children. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as Nathan's face turned from pale to red with fury. Don't you ever, he said, his voice shaking with rage, ever use our inability to have children against us again. Do you understand me? The final confrontation. Following Nathan's warning, I took preemptive measures and installed security cameras around our property. This proved prescient when, the following weekend, while Nathan was running errands, our doorbell camera captured Diana and Vanessa approaching our front door. I watched through the camera feed as they began pounding on the door. After calling Nathan, who promised to head home immediately, I answered the door but kept the security chain in place. What do you want? I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Let us in, Diana demanded, her face flushed with anger. We need to talk about this as a family. You can say whatever you need to say from there, I replied firmly. Diana launched into a tirade. You selfish, greedy woman. How dare you turn my son against his family? This is our home, I stated clearly, conscious of the camera recording every word. You have no right to demand we give it up. Vanessa joined in, her voice shrill. You're tearing this family apart. You've always tried to separate Nathan from us. Everything you're saying is being recorded, I informed them calmly. I'm prepared to use this footage to get a restraining order if necessary. Their expressions shifted from anger to shock. You wouldn't dare, Diana sputtered. The final stand. Nathan's arrival changed the dynamic immediately. He approached with purposeful strides, his face set in determination. Mom, Vanessa, he said coolly, what are you doing here? Diana rushed toward him, arms outstretched, but Nathan stepped back. Why are you here? He repeated. She's controlling you, Vanessa burst out. Can't you see that? Nathan's response was measured but firm. This is my decision. I don't want either of you in our lives anymore. Leave now, or I'm calling the police. The shock on their faces was profound. Diana began to plead, but Nathan remained unmoved. This is your last warning. Leave our property, or face the consequences. Epilogue. Later that week, Gregory reached out to Nathan. After hearing the full story, he expressed his complete support for our decision. I'm sorry, he told me personally. You never deserved any of this. The cameras remain installed on our property, but Diana and Vanessa haven't returned. Nathan's stance seems to have finally made it clear that their manipulative behavior would no longer be tolerated. We're finally free to live our lives in peace, in the home we worked so hard to create together.